And
Awesome.
yeah, Nima, take it away.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. And so if you guys are, whether you're beginners with Figma or you've been using it for a couple months or years, and this essentially workshop is for everyone, so everyone will be able to utilize it and learn from it. And the idea is that we'll kind of go through it together, part by part. We'll go through some sort of requirements that a fictional client has shared with us, and put together essentially a mobile design page for a checkout page. So it's an e-commerce app that we're going to be designing for. And we're going to go, part by part and take it slow. But as Christina mentioned, this session will be recorded. So if at any point you miss it or you miss certain parts of it, feel free to follow along. And then at that point in the future, you can always go back to the recording and watch it in more depth. Yeah, so essentially the first step we're going to do is get started with our Figma. So if you guys have your Figma open and signed up or signed in, go ahead and please do that right now. And just give everyone like 30 seconds to get that together. I have mine opened up in a desktop app for Figma. So the Figma desktop app and web app are pretty much the same thing. So you can have it open in the browser or on your desktop if you're already using the desktop app. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Awesome. Cool. And so for the requirements, they're actually shared in a Dropbox link that's in the chat. Christina, is that still there?
Yeah, I'll actually drop it right now.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, perfect. So if everyone would go ahead and actually open this Dropbox link, it will give you access to the requirements as well as any files like icons and essentially logos and images that we need. The main one that we're going to start with here is the PDF document here. So I'll give you a second. You have the link in the chat, so go ahead and make sure you download this folder. And then once you have it downloaded, you can go ahead and open this one up, or you can just follow along with me here. Both work. Awesome. So yeah, essentially we're going to be designing a mobile checkout page for a fictional company called Koala Kicks. This is the product requirement document. So typically when you're working as a freelancer or for clients, usually they share documents somewhat similar to this that has essentially the details of what they're looking for. So from here, you can see the essentially overview of the company. So this is what they do. They're an online e-commerce company selling verified sneakers of all sorts and brands all over North America. And this is the problem that they have right now. They want a sleek checkout page for their mobile app. This page will allow their customers to see all their products in their cart and confirm their information before placing the order. So this is the step that the user has already added the items into their cart, and they're just giving the final okay to go ahead and purchase essentially the products. And they've shared a little requirement of what they want on this page. So they want a title, they want the number of items that the person's added to their cart, the selected method of payment with the ability to change that, of course, the shipping address, also with the ability to change. And then we want to show the items individually. And for the items itself, we want to show it in a list format with a picture of the item. So the picture of the sneaker, the name of the item, in this case, the sneaker or the shoe size, price of the item, and then some buttons to be able to add or remove the quantity of essentially sneakers for that specific item that I have in the cart. And then essentially they want a breakdown of the subtotal, the tax, and the total price. So these will be on 3 separate lines. And then 2 buttons, one to go back to the previous page or to the cart where they came from, and 1 button to go ahead and place the order if everything looks good to them. So that's the requirement that they've shared. These are the elements that we want in this page. Typically at this point, we would start with a wireframe first in our Figma, but because it's sort of a 1-hour workshop here, we're going to kind of skip that step and go to the mockup phase. And they've gone ahead and actually shared their color scheme here, their primary color, secondary color, as well as the background colors that we're going to use, as well as their fonts here as well. Cool. So what I'd like to do is, like, typically when I get to this stage, I know the page that I want to design. I love to get inspiration from apps that I use on a daily basis, or even go to websites like Dribble and get some inspiration on, okay, what are some pages, or what are some other pages that people have already designed, so that I get some ideas of like where should things be placed, and to make sure we don't miss anything also from the project. So for that, I'll go ahead and open up Dribble. I've already done a search for e-commerce sort of checkout pages on Dribble. You can use like variety of different inspirations online. Even if you just do a Google search for designing a mobile checkout page, I'm sure tons of pages will come up. This is just one example, and I saw this one over here, and I really liked it, where they have the name of the item, the size, the price, so almost everything we're looking for. And I just like the way it's formatted, the way they have it broken down into 2 different kind of items here, as well as the quantity, and then the section for the subtotal that we talked about, as well as the total, and then the main call to action, which is placing that order. So I want to use some sort of similar design to this for our mockups, with, of course, you know, the brand assets and everything applied from Kicks. So feel free to get inspiration from other sources if you'd like, or even just pull out your phone, download the Nike app, go through the checkout page and see what does that look like, because, you know, they've done a lot of research to get that page to where it is today. So we can learn a lot from that. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and start a new Figma file for our project. So go ahead and head on over to figma.com, or if you have the desktop app like me, you can open it up from here and create a new design file. The first thing I like to do is go ahead and rename the file to what I'm working on. So I'll go ahead and rename this to Kicks here. And we're designing for a mobile app here, and I'm going to design for an iPhone screen. So go ahead and click F on your keyboard, or you can go up here and select the frame. As I'm going through this, I'm going to be using shortcuts. So I'll let you know what shortcuts I use, and yeah, we'll go from there. And you can also see it when it does pop up here. So let's go ahead and select the size from here. Figma gives you some options when you want to create a new frame. So I'm going to go ahead and select the iPhone 13 Pro Max here. And what I want to do is start with assigning essentially the color for the background of this page. So if you go back to that document that we had, they shared the background color code here. So we're going to go ahead and copy this from here using Command C. Go over here to our frame. Make sure you select the frame itself. And then in the fill, go ahead and change this fill, which is typically white here, to this color code here, and press enter. So it has like sort of a bluish tint here. And what I want to do next is to add the status bar at the top of the page here. Usually in iPhone apps, you see that status bar there. So that resource is in that Dropbox folder. So if you go to the icon, there's a status bar.png file. So I'll give you a second to locate that here. And these icons are from svgrepo.com. So at the end of the session, I can go ahead and share those links as well. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that using Command C and paste it using Command V. Right now, because it's in the frame, it's huge. It's kind of going outside of the bound. So we're going to go ahead and resize that by going to one of the corners. I'm going to hold Shift so that it maintains the proportions of the width and the height, and then go ahead and just make that smaller here and place that at the top. And the nice thing about Figma is that as you resize things, it will go ahead and snap into place. Perfect. And what we want to do now is go back to our requirements and see what else do we need. So we need the title of the page. So that's typically somewhere closer to the top. So let's go ahead and add a text box for that. I'm using the T key on my keyboard to open a text box. I'm just clicking here and writing checkout. Now, if you remember, they want Roboto as the font. So on the right side here, you can change the text settings. So instead of the one I have here, I'm going to go ahead and type in Roboto. And because it's a title, we want a bigger size. So let's go ahead and do 28 pixels. Cool. And when it comes to alignment, what I like to do sometimes is set up a layout grid here. So if you want to do that, we can do that together by selecting the frame itself, adding a layout grid. And I'm going to do a column grid. Do 6 for the count. And for the margins, I'm going to do 24. So that's how much space there is on the left and the right side of the grid. And then for the opacity, let's just bring it down to maybe 3%. We just want to have it visible enough for us to place our elements sort of aligned around the page. And I actually want a back button here as well, so that if they do click on the back button, they can go back to the previous screen. That's one of the buttons that they did request in the document here. So what I like to do for back buttons is use a back arrow or an arrow kind of like this one here. So let's go ahead and drag this one into our file. Now, of course, it's huge, so you want to go ahead and use Shift here to make it smaller. Alternatively, you can hold Shift and Alt while resizing things so that it doesn't move around. So we're going to go ahead and make this maybe somewhere around there, 26 by 26 pixels. Now, because it's pointing this way, we want to go ahead and flip it horizontally. So if you use Shift H, it will go ahead and horizontally flip your icon. So that looks good. We're going to go ahead and place that right next to our checkout. And I'm going to go ahead and select both of these together by selecting one and then holding Shift and selecting the other one. Make sure that they're aligned here vertically and group them together. Cool. So now we have the title, we have the back button. That's already two things out of the way. Move that up a little bit and let's see what else do we need. So we want the number of the items added, method of payment, shipping address, and the item. So let's get to the items first. I think that's the biggest sort of part of this page. And what we're going to do for the items is we're going to use something called components in Figma. So this allows you to essentially create multiple instances of that component. So if there's any changes that you need to make to something that's used in multiple places, you only need to make the change once instead of multiple times. So for any elements that you're using in your design that's used multiple times, it's best to use components for that. So in this component, we're going to want to have a picture of the item. We want the name of the item, the shoe size here, price of the items, and then buttons to essentially add and remove that item. So what I'm going to do here is going to go back to the Figma file and create a frame for that item. So again, you do that by clicking F. I'm going to go ahead and drag rectangle about this size here. I'm just going to stretch it out to cover that area here. And I'm going to make it 80 pixels high. So if things are a few pixels different, you can always go ahead and input the width and height here manually. Awesome. And what I want to do is add a fill for this one and make it white. I'm going to go ahead and add a border radius or corner radius of 8 here. A little bit difficult to see this, or let's go ahead and select the frame and hide our layout grid. This. There we go. And now it's sort of blending in. So what we want to do is add something to make this card stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke here. Make it a little bit lighter. That's good. Let's go ahead and add a drop shadow as well. That's really strong right now. So let's go ahead and click on this little icon to change the settings. So I'm gonna go ahead and increase the blur. Let's try 20 here, and I'll keep everything else the same. For the opacity, let's bring it down to 8%. I think we can even try a little bit lower, try 6% here. Cool. So now I want to add a placeholder for where the image will go. So something on the left side would look good. Again, you can refer to your inspiration to see, how do they do it in their kind of component here and get inspiration from there. So we're going to go ahead and create another rectangle to place our image for the sneaker. So for that one, I'm going to create a rectangle inside of my frame. So I'll click R to create the rectangle, and I want to make a square. So I'm holding Shift while I drag essentially a placeholder for it. We can make it 60 by 60. I'm going to use Alt to just check the spacing of everything. And right now it's not exactly centered or aligned perfectly, but now it is. And let's go ahead and also add corner radius of 8. And change the fill to white and add a stroke, something like this. And so for the image itself, we can always paste images into there. So we won't worry about that for now. We'll come back to that later. For now, let's add a text for the name of the item. So let's go ahead and do T and write name of item. Of course, right now it's way too big. So we want to do something like 14 pixels here. And just going to bring that a little bit to the left. I'm going to use Alt, and when you're holding Alt, you can essentially duplicate stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this text over here. Make sure you're holding Alt while you do this. And then now duplicated that text down here. And in here, I want to have the size of the item as well as the price. So let's go ahead and put $50 like this. For the size, I'm going to hold Alt and the 8 key to create sort of a circle like this. And let's just type in a 7.5 here. For the color of this one, we're going to go a little bit lighter. Let's select it again and go a little bit lighter somewhere there. And now on the right side, I want to have something to show the quantity as well as buttons to be able to remove or add items as I go. So let's go ahead and create 2 circles. We're going to use those circles as buttons for our plus or minus. So create one over here. And to create that circle, you click O. And again, you got to hold Shift so that you make sure that the width and height are the same. And let's change this to 32 by 32. There we go. And just make sure that's horizontally centered over here, vertically centered across the card. And I'm going to do the same thing here, duplicate this by dragging another one over here. Just bringing them a little bit here and maintain a sort of 10 pixel spacing from the left and the right. So we want to use this for the minus, so you can remove stuff from this card or remove this specific item. And then this one as a plus, so we can add more than the number that you have there. So we want to also add a text, of course. So let's go ahead and duplicate one more of these texts over here by holding Alt and dragging one across, and kind of double click to change this to 1. Place that over here. Now for the actual circles, we can do something like a bit of a lighter one for minus, and then for the other one, we can come back and add our primary color from the color palette, but we'll worry about that in a second. For now, let's go ahead and finish up the component. So let's add another text. This one, we're going to put a minus here, like this. Or actually, if you do Alt and the dash key, you can get a longer one like this. I'm going to duplicate this over here and add plus. Just make sure that's centered across this here. There we go. That looks good. So now what I want to do is actually turn this into a component. So any frame that you have selected or multiple objects, you can create them into components by either clicking this icon at the top, create component, or using the shortcut over there. So let's go ahead and click on it. So now this has turned into a component. And typically for your components, you want to keep track of them or have them in a separate place than your actual designs. And so this way, if you have a design system, you can have them all on a separate page. And if there's any adjustments needed, you can do that from the design system page. So of course, because we're only designing one page here, we're not going to put together a separate page for the design system. We're just going to go ahead and drag this outside of that frame. But then we're going to create a copy of it by holding Alt and dragging an instance, rather, inside of the page here. And we're going to go ahead and just center that. Awesome. Cool. So now what we can do is apply some color to this as well and add another one and add our sneakers essentially in here. So let's go ahead and bring up the our requirement document here. There we go. We're going to copy the primary color here and apply it to our circle. This one right here for the plus. Let's go ahead and change the plus to a white fill. Keep the other one the same. Let's go ahead and in the instance, add an image over here. So go ahead and select the rectangle. Make sure that the rectangle itself is selected and nothing else. And let's go back to our Dropbox folder, grab a sneaker image. Let's grab this blue Horizon 461, use Command C here. Go back into our Figma file and use Command V to paste that in. It's looking good. The only issue is that it's kind of going outside of that box. So we want to go to the fill properties here, click on the image, and instead of fill, we're going to go ahead and use fit so that the entire image fits within that bound. Go ahead and close this here. And that's starting to look good. We can go ahead and duplicate this and create another one. So I'm holding Alt again to do this. And while we're here, we can actually go ahead and apply the name of the items too. So within the file name of those images, there's the name of the items. So you can go ahead and copy it from there. And just remove the dashes and replace them with spaces here. We'll do the same thing for this other sneaker. Copy the name. Just change the price for 100 bucks here. And let's go ahead and copy the image itself. Again, select the rectangle itself and then do Command V to paste. And same thing here. Change this to fit. Awesome. That's starting to look good. Now, just to kind of show you an example of like, why is components important or what does it help here? Let's say at some point we decide to move our text over here where it has the price and the size. By moving this around, it would actually go ahead and get applied on both of your instances here as opposed to only the one. I'm going to go ahead and just reverse that by clicking Command Z. But essentially, you can imagine if you have hundreds of these items all across your design, or even dozens, this definitely helps in keeping them organized and just making changes much faster. Cool. At the very top, I want to have the number of items. That was one of the requirements. So let's add a text here and put 2 items. Now let's change the size to 18. And let's go ahead and bold that here. I think that looks good. What else do we need? So we have the title, we have the number of items added, we have the items added in there. So we want a breakdown of the pricing or the subtotal tax and the total price. a button to place the order, as well as the method of payment and shipping address. So next thing we want to do the shipping address. What I want to do is have a section that shows that shipping address that you have selected as a user, as well as the icon that we've put in the folder here. So why don't we go ahead and actually just drag while we're here, the icon for the pin. We want to use that as our kind of representation for the location into here. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this little constraint proportion button here and change our width and height to 32. Now your icon might end up somewhere outside of the frame, so just go ahead and drag that back in. Let's see. Giving us issues here. Wait, no. Yeah, it's giving us issues. Let's try that one more time here. And let's actually use, okay. Yeah, so for certain icons, what you want to do is actually, if you resize it, because it's a SVG icon, it will go ahead and actually resize the stroke as well, or constrain or keep the stroke the same. And as you can see, if you resize it, it will completely lose its shape. So for certain icons, you may need to use another tool called the scale tool. So that's down here, or you can click K on your keyboard. It will give you the same tool. And then now if you go ahead and resize it, it will maintain the proportion of the sizing of the stroke. So that's what we're going to do instead. We're going to do 32 by 32. There we go. Looks a lot better. And let's go ahead and change our selection color to our primary color. If you've already input that in there, it should be in your document color, so you can just go ahead and click on it. And let's go ahead and write sample address here. Use the text key and write 123 sample street, something like this. They show a sample street address here. And let's go ahead and unbold it. I'm using Command B to unbold this. And let's just bring it a little bit down and then duplicate this text to say that this is the shipping address. So we're going to write shipping address. And for this one, I want to go ahead and bold it. Let's actually change this text to 14 so it matches all of our other body text sizes. Cool. And if you remember in the document, it says we want to have the ability to change. So what we can do is we can actually make this section clickable so that if the user does want to click on their address, it will go ahead and change. And one of the easiest indicators on an iPhone app is to have one of these arrows and sort of represent the table format here. So let's go ahead and drag one over here. Use Shift and H to flip it around. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller, something like this, and bring it all the way to the right, and make it a bit lighter here. Maybe a little bit darker than that. There we go. It's starting to look better. Cool. So we have our shipping address with the ability to change. We want to just double check to see if everything's aligned here. That looks good. Now, right now, because I've duplicated this one here and this one already has essentially a group, this arrow is also part of that group. So if you want, you can drag that outside and you won't see that anymore. So now it's a sort of an icon on its own. There we go. Okay. And we can even go ahead and group these together by hitting Command G. So this is now all one group. So I'm going to go ahead and now do the same thing for our payment method. Let's go ahead and drag a copy of this and change this to payment method. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing with this group. There we go. Now, instead of the location icon, we want to go ahead and have the credit card icon. So feel free to switch back to the icon folder, grab this one here and drag it here. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing, use the K shortcut and hold Shift and Alt to resize that 32 by 32. I'm going to bring that here, get rid of this one and bring this one here. There we go. And make sure things are aligned so that it looks visually correct. If you're in the scale tool, you will see your properties panel will change. So just go ahead and hit escape on your keyboard to get out of there and go back to that normal properties panel. For the selection color, I'm going to go ahead and change it to our primary color again. And instead of this sample street address, we're going to use the same technique that we did up here. Use Alt and 8. Create 4 dots like this. Let's just put 1, 2, 3, 4 for that sort of last 4 digits on a credit card. That's typically how we see it in sort of payment method pages. And yeah, so we have 2 things added out of the way now. We have the shipping address, the selected method of payment. And now we have 2 more sections to work on. One is the button for placing the order. The other one is the subtotal, tax, and total price. So why don't we go ahead and do that by adding the text here for the subtotal, tax, and the total price. And we're going to do that at the sort of closer to the, or right after our payment method, we can do that. So I'd like to divide these sections because even in our sort of the page we were looking at earlier for our inspiration, there's a little line over here that divides different sections. So I really like to use lines in design because what you want to do is put things that are similar or related to each other closer together so that you can separate things out. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a line by clicking L on our keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and drag one across here. And just make sure this other end, and I'm holding Shift, by the way, to make sure that I don't create a line that's at an angle. So I'm using Shift to hold that line, dragging it all the way across so that it's matching our margins for all the other components here, for the elements. For stroke color, let's do a little bit of a lighter sort of gray, like so. And that's really starting to come together. So we want to add our 3 lines of text, one for our subtotal, one for tax, and one for total. So let's go ahead and press T, write subtotal here. And I'm going to go ahead and change the font size to 18. Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this text, drag a copy across, and again, I've done that using holding Alt and dragging a copy across. We're going to go ahead and right align this one. So make sure in your text for the alignment, instead of left align, which is usually what's selected, you do the right align. And let's go ahead and just write the price here, which is 150 here for the subtotal. Now, again, because we're doing the mockup stage, we're putting things, putting all the data in as well. If we're doing wireframing first, we would just put the placeholder text and then come back and fill it with sample data. But in this case, we're doing kind of both together. Cool. So let's go ahead and hold Alt here while having both selected, both the subtotal and the price. Drag a copy down here. There we go. And we're going to now change this to tax. Change this to $15. And I'm going to do that one more time. And for this one, we're going to put our total. $165 here. So for the total, let's go ahead and change these to 28. Might be a little bit too big, so let's try maybe 22 here. There we go. We can even go ahead and bold them because that total is usually the more important information that users care about. So we want to make it stand out a little bit more than the other ones. So there we have this section. And right after this, we want our button to place the order, and this page should be good to go. So for our button, we can simply use a rectangle. So let's go ahead and click R, drag a rectangle across here. We will do 50 for the height. And again, just making sure everything's aligned. Yep. I'm going to bring this closer to the bottom of the page. And if you're wondering how am I getting these essentially sizes or pixels, I'm holding Alt while I have an element selected. Let's go ahead and change the corner radius to 8 and our fill to our primary color. And I'm going to go ahead and place the text on top of this, and I'm going to name that place order. I think we can make this a little bit smaller. So let's do 18 pixels for the place order font. Bold is good. Usually for call to actions, we want to make it bold, especially if it's an important one like place order here. Whenever you have two things selected, you can always select them together, both of them together like this, and then use the alignment just to make sure everything's properly aligned. And then if you want, you can either group them together, or if you hit, again, Option Command K, you can actually turn this into a component too. So typically we see buttons as part of components. I'll just go ahead and reverse that and just leave it as is. Yeah, so there we have it. This is our checkout page. I hope you've been able to follow along and get it somewhat going. Yeah, so that's pretty much all there is here. Just to double check, we're gonna check we have everything. We have the title, the number of items added. We have the selected method of payment here with the ability to change. Same thing for the shipping address. Our items are listed here. One thing I do suggest is maybe adding a little bit more spacing here. So you can always, even if you drag across here and bring these a little bit more down, just to add a little bit more space between the different sections here. Yeah, and so at this stage of the process, I would go through and just do one more final polish, make sure things are aligned, everything looks good, nothing's missing, which we went through. We have the items with the picture in there, the name, the shoe size, price of the item, buttons to add and remove. You have the subtotal, the tags, the total itself, and the buttons to go back, and the buttons to place the order. And yeah, that's pretty much it for our page here. So I hope you've enjoyed this. We're gonna go ahead and just open this up here. Thank you for joining. So if you want to take this a step further, you can always design the confirmation page that comes after the order is placed. I recommend doing the similar thing, going through, getting inspiration from outside resources and seeing what are the elements we need there, and then go ahead and design something up based on that. And you already have access to some of the resources like the company logo or the color